I'm Dan.
And I'm Alex.
And welcome back to On Air, everybody.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Can we...
we
keep each other la company, Alex. La company.
Right. So the listeners keep us company. That's one. Number two, this is a joke that dates back several years. Okay.
Since
because
2015 or I guess
2015 or so. There still is. There's a little French airline called La Compagnie, and they do all business class flights over the transatlantic area. And we used to crack up because this little irrelevant airline, bless them, okay, they used to view our Instagram stories, like when Instagram stories were not so popular and there'd be like 100 views. La Compagnie was always there. And we used to say to each other, La Compagnie want to keep us company. And like that song, right?
Yeah, it was an early joke. And I wanted to text it to you the other day. And then I was like, let me just save this for the podcast to teach everyone more inside jokes. So if you ever listen to that song or if it ever autoplays or something, maybe now you also will only think of La Compagnie. So how are you doing, Alex?
I'm good. I mean, you're unlocking. You know when you literally don't think of anything and then somebody unlocks a memory for you? I've had that a few times this week because I've been catching up with old friends and whatever, and they've been talking about different memories that you just don't even consider. And then suddenly it's like that part of your brain is unlocked. Something to do with, for example, at school, they were discussing how, were you ever the kid that had to give out the whiteboards, right, to the class, and you would make an assessment on how clean/dirty the whiteboards are as to who you give them to? So, for example, you'd see a sparkly, white, clean, relatively new whiteboard, and I'd make my way straight over to a friend, right? Emmy, that's for you. And then there'd be this dirty, scratched up one, and I'd find the kid in the class I didn't like, and I'd be like, there you go.
Okay, I literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, if anyone is listening that went to school in the UK, they will know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like a fixture, a permanent fixture of what you... Didn't you ever have to do class activities where you had to show something on a whiteboard, right? Everyone write the word it, and you throw up the whiteboard, right?
No, never.
No. Okay. Hang on. Hold on a second. Didn't you go to school in the UK?
And yeah, but I always went. So I went to a normal school when I was 5. Mm-hmm. Then I hated that. So my parents reversed course and we moved to East Sussex to go to basically the most famous Waldorf Steiner school in the world, which is very alternative. You just read stories, you play outside, very creative. And I think that explains a lot about how I've become.
Wow. Okay. So this is why he has absolutely no bloody idea as to what I'm talking about with this basic ass state school whiteboard story, because the poor guy was, having his head hooked up to machines so that they could determine if he's the next Einstein or not.
No, it was the opposite. It was not about being studious at all. It was just about enjoying your childhood, and it was very hippie kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. We'll have to dive more of it. See, look at us being derailed just from the intro. I mean, nothing to do with anything that we're talking about. I'm talking about whiteboards. You're talking about being a hippie from young.
And we both have no idea what the other person is on about.
No.
So how about we move into something that we both understand, which is aviation? Sound good?
One of us does. One of us. So
me.
I wanted to start off. You're funny. I wanted to start off with what we are starting to see in terms of the industry basically admit that maybe that boom period that has been here since 2022, I would say, since the early summer of 2022, so the end of March, whereby everything has just been go hard or go home in the airline industry as they built back from all those losses of COVID. I think the bubble has well and truly burst now. Right, we are seeing, and I say that not that things are not great. Airlines are making more money than ever, as we've discussed, but some pretty rational / woo decisions are being made. So British Airways, the UK's flag carrier, once described Beijing as one of the most important routes on the entire route network, understandably so, because of Beijing as a destination, because of the economic powerhouse that China is, and so on and so on. Well, BA are suspending all flights to Beijing and withdrawing. They're going to do it for at least a year and then figure out how it went. What did you think when you saw this?
So a big part of me wasn't surprised at all, but I feel sad about it because it's still a sign of how the world has changed since COVID. And this essentially reflects on international demand to and from China and how the world has become a lot more divided. So Chinese tourists are traveling in quite big numbers to some places, but not so much the US or Europe. So maybe less the West, but then you look, for example, at flights between China and Russia, and they are at an all-time high. So I think it's partly a reflection of decreased demand and partly a reflection of global politics at the moment. But it's incredible to see the biggest city, or the powerhouse of Europe as a continent, not continental Europe, but as a whole, London, no longer being connected by their flag carrier to the capital of, well, one of the world's other huge powerhouses, China. Well, what do you think as a Brit?
Well, I can understand how, as you say, the dynamics have shifted since, but I also think there are a couple of other contributors here at play. So firstly, there is a lot of capacity from Chinese airlines, right? So they ultimately have been accused of capacity dumping into the London market because Air China already flies double daily into Heathrow. It now flies daily to Gatwick as well from Beijing. The fares are consistently lower. The onboard product now is pretty decent, given that they've taken delivery of new aircraft and so on. And their connections onwards, because China's just absolutely vast. That connections are able to be much more agile, much more flexible, shorter if required, and so on. So for the average person that actually does want to venture back and explore China since the pandemic, when they're putting in that search on Skyscanner or similar, then immediately, that top result, it's not British Airways. It hasn't been for a very long time. That's definitely a contributor. I think number two, the fact that overflying Russian airspace is now no longer a possibility for BA to some, and for many European airlines to a country like China is incredibly costly and difficult and is behind this decision. To put it into context, for BA, it takes them 13 hours and 20 minutes to fly on the same route to Beijing that Air China can do in around 11 hours. So there's 2 hours, 15 minutes or so there of extra fuel that is required in one of the directions, at least, for a British Airways flight, because they have to ultimately avoid the airspace of Russia ever since the war in Ukraine. And so all these kind of ultra long haul flights from the West and from Western Europe specifically to the Far East have suffered as a result of that. And then there's all these kind of like other small reasons which you'll really be able to relate to, Dan, given that you have shown yourself to me as an absolute expert with tax-free shopping, as we witnessed in Galeries Lafayette in Paris just a couple of months back, or last month. The way in which Chinese used to spend in the UK,
I was just about to bring this up,
now no longer exists. It's just not a thing, not least because there's no tax-free shopping in the UK here anymore, which just seems like such a stupid decision that they are literally killing themselves. Because you ask any of the high spenders, right, who want to be spending in the LVMH level brands, so Louis Vuitton, Hermes and so on, they are not buying from London. Why would they, when they can buy from Paris an hour away less and have a pretty significant tax refund before they depart the country?
Yeah, there's so much I want to say, so many topics. Just sticking to this very quickly about tax-free and duty-free. I don't know if it was a spokesperson or an executive, I don't remember, but someone from Frankfurt Airport who is an authority on the subject told me in 2017 that over 90% of all duty-free revenue at Frankfurt Airport used to come pre-COVID from Chinese passengers alone. people with a Chinese passport accounted for 90%, which is, it just tells you what a different demographic this is and what a huge impact everything that's happened since COVID has had. And then just quickly on BA as well, the fact that they have to operate a longer flight than their competitors. It's not only that, but they're operating an ancient 777-200, which of course is far less fuel efficient on this route than, for example, China Southern, I see, which operates it with an A350. But finally, what this brings us to, and US airlines have been, at the head of this debate for the past few years since the Ukraine war started. This brings us to the topic of Chinese airlines or certain other airlines, we've discussed it before, being able to much more effectively compete because they're using Russian airspace on routes to Europe while European airlines can't. Yeah. And US airlines are arguing, well, why should foreign airlines be allowed to do that and gain a competitive advantage over us when we can't do it? But then, of course, the rational argument for consumers and for the environment is, why shouldn't the airlines that can take the quickest possible route, right?
Of course. I mean, you can't just say that they cannot cry foul that they are in a dispute / they are standing in a moral way with, for example, Ukraine and against the invasion from a couple years back. And so, there are all kinds of fallout from that, which everyone is super aware of. But that is their situation. It's not then fair to then say, well, hold on, China, which of course we know has a different relationship with China, a different perception with Russia, with Russia, a different perception on the situation and different involvement and so on and so on. You can't expect them to match your foreign policy stance, which will therefore impact what route you take and ultimately the revenue you're able to generate from that flight and so on. It's just, when I hear the US kind of grandstand in that way, it just sounds ridiculous. It just sounds like such a dated mentality of, you will have to think like us. And it's like, no, you do you, and you are in agreement with much of the West in terms of, the fact that the Russian invasion into Ukraine is, quote, unlawful or so on and so on, as different international jurisdictions have determined. But it doesn't then mean that Air China has to match your foreign policy or China itself,
Yeah, it's true. It's a very complex thing. And then, on the original topic you brought up about airlines cutting routes, I feel like I'm confused between saying routes and routes. It's because I talk to you, but I should be saying routes. We've said this before, but yeah. Anyway, we also have the sad news that anytime a viewer messages me and they say, what airline should I fly from Europe to the US? I go, well, listen up. You have two especially cool options, which is Emirates from Milan or Athens to New York, or you have Singapore Airlines from Frankfurt to New York, or from Manchester to Houston. But this week, the sad news has come that Singapore Airlines will also be closing this pretty noteworthy route starting next spring.
I was at the launch of this route, the Manchester-Houston route, and I didn't fly the flight itself because I had commitments that week, but I joined them for the arrival of the A350 from Singapore, where it would make a stop at a gloomy, dark, wintry Manchester, as it was that morning. And at Manchester, it would spend a little time on the ground before departing on the Fifth Freedom route that it had managed to ultimately secure, connecting Manchester with Houston, but also those passengers that had just flown all the way from Singapore. I have got to admit, Dan, I can't believe this route survived as long as it did. I mean, it actually got to a point where last year I remember just double checking this. They still fly that, right? Because it's just, I feel like the world is a different place as to when Singapore launched that route. And, Manchester is not it's not the economic powerhouse that internationally attracts the level of Singapore Airlines connecting with somewhere oil rich like Houston. There are a variety of different routes that I think should be launched from the likes of Manchester, and definitely, as an alternative to London, because BA is basically London Airways, as many people refer to it. You should be able to go very easily from Manchester to New York, for example, Manchester to Las Vegas, which I know Virgin Atlantic are finally bringing back, and so on. But I'm surprised Singapore Airlines kind of hung around as long as they did.
Yeah, and to be fair, Singapore Airlines is a very premium airline with high prices. They rely on a lot of business travel to command their high fares. So it isn't really a route that makes sense. And the interesting thing is that this route used to fly from Singapore to Moscow to Houston, and they also used to fly Singapore, Moscow, Stockholm. So just, a few years back, pre-COVID, Moscow was sort of a mini hub. It's interesting to, even just a few years later now, post-COVID, how Singapore Airlines flying from Moscow to Houston or to Stockholm seems just unbelievable and so alien. But that was the case just a few years ago, and anyone flying from Stockholm would fly via Moscow. That was nothing strange.
Wow. And of course, sticking to China as well, Virgin Atlantic, a similar decision was made not too long ago. They will be axing their flights to Shanghai. This is something that many were quite surprised at, because this is, Virgin's footprint in Asia has just continued to shrink year on year. Also pulling out of Shanghai for the same reason. They are unable to use Russian airspace. Therefore, they require more fuel and longer routes versus their Chinese or Asian competitors. And in terms of, flexibility, when I think of Shanghai, I do think of economic powerhouse. I do think of an important and prominent business hub for trade and kind of connectivity regionally. And
Yeah.
when I think of trade and connectivity regionally, I do not think of Virgin Atlantic's rigid, lack of frequency routes to Shanghai. It's a bit like the Dubai flight, I think. Like, okay, if it happens to work out for you on that day, great. But otherwise, it's not anything that can offer you the flexibility to, swap onto, move flights later that day, and so on and so on, which tends to be the requirements of the demographic that it serves, that is for the markets like Shanghai and so on.
Yeah. Wait, so you're talking about Virgin Atlantic's route to Dubai?
Virgin Atlantic's route to Shanghai, but also to Dubai, kind of reminds me of the same setup.
Yeah. I mean, this is something we see every winter, but it's especially clear this upcoming winter season that airlines just don't really know where to send their aircraft. So they're launching all type of, questionable routes. I'm sure London to Dubai is a good route for Virgin Atlantic. Oh my God, now I said route. Okay, stop. For Virgin Atlantic these days, because demand from the UK to Dubai is crazy. But in general, the airlines have these massive fleets that they can fill and fly very profitably in the summer. And then in the winter, they're just like, okay, maybe let's try sending them here, like we saw last winter when United made a massive investment in flying to Australia and New Zealand, launched all types of new routes from San Francisco and Los Angeles, and pretty much all of them have failed. So this upcoming winter, nothing will be coming back. And in fact, I think they're even decreasing capacity compared to previous years before they made that increase. So it just shows that demand is so highly seasonal in the industry.
Indeed. I want to pick you up on your latest video on YouTube, right? This was your American Airlines experience traveling from Pittsburgh to New York to London. And, I genuinely always enjoy watching your videos, right? I make sure I watch it on TV. I guess that's how YouTube behavior has changed.
Yeah.
So there's so many things I watch on my phone or on the laptop, but yours I want to watch on TV. So I kind of like get comfortable, have my cranberry, press play, and I'm like, let's see him suffer, right? Because I know that it's probably going to be a kind of suffering experience because, you're flying American Airlines.
Yeah.
So, you can imagine how I was like, when you make this, you put together this fantastically kind of in-depth review that was very thorough, I thought incredibly fair. I messaged you. In fact, I said to you, you are way too glass half full, because I would have been, there's so many things I would have been, what is that? What is that? You know, but not least a little snippet that I took and put on Twitter from your video, quoting you, tagging you, whereby
debatable.
We'll come to that in a minute. Whereby American Airlines Senior Vice President for in-flight and premium services. And just to give this, just to provide an added context to listeners, okay, if you are the SVP of in-flight and premium guest services, your literal focus in that role and of your team, and you'll have a big team as an SVP, is to elevate the in-flight and premium guest service.
That's your only job.
Couldn't be clearer. It's one of those positions that actually is not so vague. So, for example, you know, perhaps the chief customer experience officer is a little more broad in what their mandate is, right? But if you are the SVP of in-flight and premium guest services, I have just spelt it out for you, right? When you sign that contract, it is completely clear what is expected. So you can imagine the fact that you were able to resurface this clip from just earlier this year, this interview, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it when it came out, and I was like, someday I'm going to use this. So I noted it down, and then
Brady Burns, the guy who we're talking about, who is American Airlines SVP in-flight and premium guest service. And I know I've mentioned that 10 times now, but it's because I couldn't quite believe that title matched up with this quote. He said, quote, "It really doesn't matter what we serve, just so long as we're on time." This is not the guy who is SVP OTP, you know, the on-time performance.
Yeah.
He's the guy who tries to elevate the I mean, the fact you're able to include it into your video, I feel goldmine, because your video showed us quite literally the world's opposite experience of an airline that even has an SVP in that area.
Yeah,
you were
true.
suffering, okay? But you were so fair and glass half full with it. I was like, what is he doing? I would be roasting the shit out of them by now. But you were like, oh, so the headphones don't work, but it's okay. I'll take a quick trip to the galley and ask for the 5th time. I'm like, what? I would have been emailing the CEO on attempt number 2.
Yeah, it was quite funny reading the comments, because some things that, I mean, I wasn't, like, I go into American Airlines with such low expectations that I wasn't, like, shocked by it. But then some of the comments highlighted just how crazy some of the things were, and I was just like, you know, this is true. And then the reason I put that clip in from the SVP of in-flight and premium guest services is that I know people are always going to find reasons to criticize me or say I'm too picky or I'm making things up. So I'm like, you know what? Here I have literal evidence of someone high up in this airline saying it doesn't matter what they serve, because all that matters is they're on time. And if that's all that matters, you are literally Ryanair, because their whole thing is when you land, they play that little trumpet thing and they go, Ryanair is always on time, blah, blah, blah. So that's basically
they
American
had
Airlines.
the schedule. That's why.
Yeah, and not only that, Ryanair is rarely on time during summer season when things get really busy.
Yeah, just like after the second rotation.
Yeah.
The funny part is that, as you said, so this quote was that he said, he really doesn't matter what we serve, which reminded me of Melania Trump's jacket, that I really don't care, do you? Do you remember when she wore that, right?
I saw it when you shared it on Twitter now, too.
So the other part that I found funny was just how many comments. This little clip that I put out, I thought, you know, a few people will see it. It's got over 118,000 views. That's just the clip on Twitter alone. I guess that's a credit to the success of your YouTube video. I mean, I only shared 7 seconds of it.
If you had linked my YouTube video, it might have been even more successful.
I thought a tag was enough. But anyway, the funny part that I found, first, how many hundreds of people got in touch to say, but the flight's not even on time. So, you know, you can't even claim that the reason your service is so terrible is because you're focused on on-time performance, because people were saying, but they're not on time either. So you failed on both attempts. I'll read you a few of the replies. Someone has put, now we know. The Nick Jonathan put, and this is why I will never voluntarily fly US airline. Benjamin put, American Airlines is just terrible. Cameron put, it's hard to pay for a premium experience when executives promise it will not manifest. Wow. Another person has put, great American Airlines, G's from someone that flies up front. David put, not surprised in the slightest, only surprised it wasn't United's SVP, as their food is even worse. There's, you know, it's, I just can't believe, if you're in that position, I can't believe you actually say that out loud.
I know.
It's one thing to think it and to know that you're not going to pull your weight in terms of elevating for your passengers, considering they are paying a fortune, right? A small fortune. But to actually come out with, you know what, I'm in this position, but it doesn't matter what our service is like. And by service, we don't mean the level of attention to detail or how fast they respond to the call bell. He's responsible for all of it. Okay, so it's the dining, it's the culinary experience, it's the hard and soft product that we refer to a lot. So, you know, in terms of what they're offering that you can touch, seat, blankets, bedding, amenities, all of that, but also the soft product. So the service, your interaction with the crew and the service that you would expect and so on. And I mean, this video, Dan, I just found a bit depressing.
Well, there was this pretty funny story we found, or I found when I was researching the video, and then you found, I guess, when you watched my video, about there was like a thread on Flyer Talk where basically this guy was having beef with the cabin crew somehow on a flight. So
just clarify that he was not being served beef.
No, he was. This is what we call a fight. Yeah. I don't want to go too much into it because it's just, we don't know what's true. But if you want to Google Brady by Barnes, you might find something interesting.
Let's just say there's some very well documented evidence online as to the relationship that he has with the crew that he is ultimately responsible for, and they are essentially reporting to him. But when you've got a guy at the top that is publicly admitting on TV, I really don't care, do you? Okay, that was Melania Trump's jacket, but kind of similar. Then, you know, I just think you're setting yourself up there for a complex and perhaps even toxic working environment, allegedly. But don't take that from me. Have a Google for yourself and have a look. I mean, people were getting in touch with me saying that they thought that the clip was a kind of like an SNL sketch, right? So yeah, all in all, not a good look for an airline that is supposed to be a premium legacy carrier. Nothing super new, Dan, but I would invite listeners to head over to his YouTube channel. There you go, look, he's going to be happy now, to go over to his YouTube channel and check this video out, because I think you were incredibly fair, perhaps more fair than I would have been, on this experience you had traveling from the East Coast on a daytime flight, which you maybe said about 100 times in the video.
Because I love it.
Like you were flying supersonic on a day. This is me eating on my daytime flight. I'm like, we get it. It's daylight. Move on. But
those flights are the best. But yeah, I wish I was. Oh no, that was not that trip. But I was recently supposed to fly JetBlue from New York to Europe, but I had to cancel that. I need to fly that so soon, because I'm just anticipating a wildly different experience, and I hope that's the case.
For this episode, we wanted to spend a lot of time on Q&A because there is so much ground to cover and so many topics that you guys have written in with for us to get going and discuss. So we're going to move now to many of your questions so that we can get a diverse range in.
Let's do it.
I'll begin with this question from Louis. This came in really like just hours ago, okay? And those that have sent in their questions over the last week or even the last 10 days, you're also on the list, not to worry. Louis says, hey guys, I was on a British Airways flight from London to St. Lucia in premium economy. When I sat down, I realized the charging socket below me wasn't working. After asking 3 different crew, finally I got a response saying try it now, and it still didn't work. So I asked if I could sit in another empty seat to see if the socket there worked. She said, sorry sir, but we're not allowed to do that. Nothing else, and walked away, bearing in mind half of the cabin was empty. What is your view on this? Have you had a similar experience elsewhere? I was waiting for that detail. His whole message, I was thinking, okay, well, surely that means that the cabin was full.
Yeah.
Wait, half of the cabin was empty. What?
This sounds like American Airlines to me, so sounds familiar.
That's bizarre.
I think, if I was in that situation, I would have just switched seats anyway,
So would
or
I.
charged in a different seat at least. Just put your device there if you can keep an eye on it. But it's just weird behavior from the crew. Unfortunately, that happens,
Yeah, that's Louis. I would have been like Dan. I would have moved as well. I mean, if the cabin is half full, what are they doing trying to fix you to a specific seat when you just want to? You don't even want to sit there. You just want to charge your device.
Yeah. So by the way, if the crew would have then reacted negatively to you switching seats, then there's something wrong, because clearly this crew were not paying attention. You had to ask 3 people for help. So they're not paying attention to anything. Odds are they wouldn't even notice or care that you moved. If they then did care about that points to a big issue with the crew, and I would probably find a way to escalate that complaint.
How would you escalate it, Nonstop Dan?
Via Googling British Airways feedback and then writing a complaint straight to the feedback office and saying, what was going on here? What about you?
I think I would have, I would have written into British Airways too. Maybe that's just bizarre. It's such a weird scenario that you had to go through. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Mason asks, is onboard theft on the rise? This is nicely linked to the previous. He says, is onboard theft on the rise? Is this why we are seeing the likes of Qatar Airways and the new Q Suite introduce a secure lockable drawer? I note that there are some airlines that have to take practical measures to ensure that they mitigate when it comes to onboard theft. So I think what Mason is talking about, and I don't know if they still do this. If any of you have flown this route recently, you can tell me. I mean, you might have done. But as far as I know, there was a long period of time where Ethiopian Airlines were flying overnight flights between Addis and Dubai, for example, with full 100% bright white hospital grade lighting on the A350. And that was because they noted that the moment they plunged the cabin into darkness for passengers to sleep on the overnight flight, theft commenced.
Yeah. I mean, that's horrible that it is that way. I think we said then when we discussed it that there should be, more cameras in flight. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. It's a public space. So, what are you doing that you're not comfortable being on camera with? And I just think that would maybe help discourage any sort of crime. But I feel like most of what's happening, if anything is happening, and I personally haven't seen like a rise in stories about in-flight theft, but if something is happening, it's probably mostly opportunistic. So someone sees, oh, there's a phone there, there's no one guarding it, or even probably something that's much less noticeable if it disappears, like, oh, I can just grab something out of their wallet that they left on their seat while they went to the bathroom. So when we see Q Suite 2.0 or whatever you want to call it introduce a drawer that's closable or lockable, I just think that's so that it discourages that opportunistic grab, and you have to be more sort of thought out to be able to do something.
And I think also what is at risk, as you say, it's opportunistic, but also it's predominantly, at least the data that is available to us shows that it's predominantly jewelry based. And so like jewelry being targeted, so watches and jewelry and so on. And, there are many scenarios where people take off that watch, put it on the side, and then sleep for the next 8 hours. And, with the wrong person around you, that's a little bit of a risk anywhere in society. But unfortunately, also that extends to the confines of an aircraft cabin in some scenarios, but it is still rare, I think.
Yeah.
Gregors, and I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. It's a Polish name. My apologies if I've just mispronounced that. He says, hi, Alex and Dan. I've been listening to the On Air since day one, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the work you put into it. Thank you very much for that comment. Seriously, we'll just come on and chat. But anyway, Your podcast is packed with aviation knowledge, and as a total av geek, I really appreciate it. I have a quick question for both of you. What apps do you use to stay updated during your trips? I'm curious about any tools that you use to track aircraft positions, weather, for example, monitor load factors, or anything else that you can find helpful. There are so many out there, but I'm sure you have your favorites as seasoned travelers. Sending warm greetings from Poland. Okay, you're up.
Okay, I'll list mine, and then if there's any additional ones you use, because I think you use the same ones, just mention those. So first, we talk about this app all the time. It's an essential not only during a trip, but when planning a trip or just to learn about what's going on. Flight Radar 24. You can use it to track a specific flight so that the flight actually appears on your home screen with live tracking. You can find all types of information about what aircraft is operating your flight. Depending on the airline, that can be loaded into the system days beforehand. Then you can track where it's coming from and know any delays and check delay. For example, I often use it to check if the gate at Heathrow isn't displayed, for example, but I know which aircraft my flight is being operated by. I track which flight that aircraft arrived on, which gate did it pull into, so that I know where to head if I want to get a head start. I also always use, we've spoken about this as well, Expert Flyer.
Yes,
I have a premium membership
must.
there. Yeah, so you can see the load factors on different flights.
You have a free membership there?
No. Oh, wait, premium. I don't know what I said.
Sorry. Yeah.
I have a paid membership anyway. So
how much do you pay per month for that?
It's $100 a year, I think. I pay per year.
Can you pay annually rather than monthly?
Yeah, and you save quite a bit. So
I need to do that because I hate monthly. You know, there's so much that comes out monthly, like Netflix and Prime and whatever. I much prefer to pay annually, but Expert Flyer I pay monthly. I don't know how I'm in that cycle. It's like $9 a month.
Stop that now. So anyway, annual $100. You see,
on my list.
You can check how many seats are available in each fare class, which is an indication what the load factor is, but it's not always 100% accurate. You can check seat maps on almost all airlines.
It's bloody accurate, to be honest. It's so accurate. It's amazingly accurate. He's just covering himself. But seriously,
but to be fair,
it's amazing.
Sometimes I've seen where I assume this is a situation, for example, where there are a lot of people who are deadheading or something, where the seat map will be full, but it might still say J4, for example, which means maybe they're willing to kick whoever those people are off in order to be able to sell those seats. But
I usually assume that's usually overselling. So they're just overbooking. So for example, the flight is still open for purchase online, despite the fact that the cabin is full, because that's just overbooking.
Yeah, it's just sometimes it can be like I said, 4 seats or something, which I feel
which
is quite a lot to oversell by in business. But okay, what else? Do you have any others?
No, Expert Flyer I swear by. I mean, that just helps with absolutely everything, monitoring loads and seat maps and everything. It's so much, you can be so empowered to be able to say, I would like to move to 2 Juliet, please. And she's like, oh, I'm just going to check if that's available. And it's great because you already know that it is. That's why you've made that suggestion in the first place, because on-air listeners are educated, they're empowered, and they have the right tools to travel and be their best traveler version of themselves. So this is why Expert Fly definitely, we need to be sponsored by them, the amount that we mention them, but they are great.
Actually, we should try.
I don't use... I use Flight Radar so much. I don't really use a bunch of the other apps. Like, I don't use FlightAware. I think that's very US centric. I feel.
Yeah, I don't use that either. I will say Flyer Talk is a very useful tool. You guys can obviously ask questions here on the podcast, but there are people who fly, let's say, British Airways so much that they know every little in and out. They've been through every situation, and being able to go onto the British Airways forum on Flyer Talk, post about your situation and get good guidance from people who are really experienced with your airline is also very valuable if you ever don't know what to do in a situation.
Yeah, really good, really good. So there you go. Those are our key tools for you there. Next question I have here is from Hardy in Illinois in the US. He says, Hi, Alex and Dan. Hope you're both well. I wanted to ask what your opinions are on the current state of Pakistani aviation because there's been so much talk about Pakistan International Airlines being privatized. But how quickly do you think this will come, given Pakistan's current economic state? The same case with the European ban. Do you think PIA and other airlines will be cleared for operation soon, given that they've passed some regulatory checks? Thank you for providing me and so many others with something to look forward to every week. I only started listening a few months back, but have binged each episode just to be all caught up. All the best, Hardy from Illinois. Thank you for that message. It's really great to hear. Pakistan. Very interesting what is happening there with Pakistan International Airlines. We know that the airline was expecting to have the European ban lifted, and that wasn't the case. And they say that it's not just linked with what happened in 2020 with the whole fake licenses scandal, but a whole bunch of different reasons. The other part as well is that we will know relatively soon what will happen with the privatization of PIA. The national carrier has had some interest from foreign entities, particularly Gulf-based entities, but not necessarily Gulf carriers. There is a big difference. But also there is interest domestically within Pakistan. I think the decision is set to be announced as to what is happening, how much of the airline is going to be sold and to whom by the beginning of October. So by the beginning of Q4 this year. And I would expect that we see most of the airline being sold. From what I understand, the stake that is potentially for sale is anything up to about 90. So we're talking about a significant ownership. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a wait and see game. And obviously the airline isn't in the best state right now. And that's hand in hand with the state of the economy. But again, I'm going to separate it for a minute and think that the airline can have a pretty decent path forward with the right ownership. And I think that's what we will learn at the beginning of Q4 as to whether or not it's going to be on track for that, depending on who ends up buying the carrier.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially in the West, we forget that, yes, India is incredibly populous, but Pakistan and Bangladesh are so much more populous than we ever consider. Like Pakistan has a population of over 240 million, and it's not a very big country surface-wise. They don't have very good road infrastructure and ways of getting around. So aviation is really, really vital in Pakistan. Frankly, it's not a very big market there yet. And Pakistan International Airlines has been struggling for a long time in many different ways. The CEO, I think it was the CEO, I don't think it could have been the owner, but basically the top dog of Pakistan International Airlines, her daughter was in my class at university.
Whoa.
Which is kind of crazy. Yeah. And I remember...
Are you in touch?
Not really. Maybe I could easily get in touch with her. So maybe we should try to get someone from the airline on the podcast if we could.
You should reach out to her. Firstly, you should reach out to her to say hi. It's always nice to say hi. How you doing? Okay. Secondly, once you've reached out, let us find out exactly what is happening in this crucial time for the airline that she's essentially the daughter of. To put on an American accent.
I'm like, hey girl, I haven't spoken to you in 6 years, but what do you think about?
Listen, better late than never. That's what I say. Better late than never. To match you, I would choose someone that I haven't spoken to in 6 years and send them a message as well, so you feel better. How about that?
Okay, all right, let's do that. I will also say I assume you have not flown with them.
Your assumption is correct.
Yeah, I think you would be scared even looking at one of their aircraft. I have flown them from, this sounds so random, but I'm pretty sure it was Copenhagen to Oslo years back because I was like,
God, honestly,
this was back when I was, I wanted to try as many different airlines as possible.
In his struggle to make his little pointless region relevant, he's trying to convince us, dear listener, that he flew Pakistan International Airlines intra-Scandi.
Yeah, the video is still on my channel, so there is evidence there. But even on that route, that was pretty much top 10 worst flights I've ever taken. So
Wow.
that was on a 777-200 LR, I'm pretty sure.
Nice.
Yeah, interesting experience.
The consortium that ultimately is shortlisted to take over Pakistan International Airways, mostly Pakistani holdings companies, groups, and so on. There's Air Blue, Arif Habib Corporation, Blue World City, Fly Jinnah, Pak Ethanol Consortium, and the YB Holdings Consortium. Again, these are not aviation names, but that doesn't mean that there will not be other, potentially even other airlines involved as they kind of check to see what bits of the airline will be swooped up and where. The airline, I think, will be bought outright, and I think there is more chance than there is otherwise that it will be bought by one group of buyers rather than a kind of split arrangement where they have a 20% stake from one Gulf airline and a 30% here. So I think the idea is that they want a real significant, solid owner. But things are going to make that process really difficult, not least the fact that they can't fly to Europe. You know, and so by them not being able to resume flights to London, Paris, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, you know, these are routes that the airline's ability was ultimately, you know, founded on in terms of being able to connect Pakistan with key European business hubs. That's a difficult sell while the ban is in place. Made even worse by the fact that I remember a broadcast that I did a few months ago where it was widely expected in Pakistan that ban was about to be lifted. And so all the rhetoric was how, oh, but that's fine. You know, at the beginning of summer, we go back to Europe, we start flying to London in June, we start flying to Paris in July. There were a whole bunch of plans. It really came as a shock to the airline and to many in the country that the sanctions continued, that the ban was maintained by the European Union, who work, of course, in tandem with the UK Civil Aviation Authority, both of them working together to continue the ban that they have on the carrier.
Yeah, we'll see if that changes. Obviously, that's one of many hurdles facing the airline.
Yeah. Question I have here from, I'll just bring it up. We have a question here from JC in London. He says, hi, Alex, loving the podcast. I would like to ask about Emirates and the route to London Stansted. Why does the airline serve Stansted alongside their existing routes Heathrow and Gatwick? It seems to be the only full-service carrier that operates to 3 London airports. What do you think?
Well, that's your neck of the woods, so I'll ask you what you think.
Well, I think that in order to understand why Emirates fly to Stansted, you have to understand where Stansted is on the map, because it is ultimately in Essex. And there is a very strong link between the county of Essex, the people, and Dubai. I mean, this is really nothing to do with, you know, onwards travel and connectivity. And it's not, you know, Australian kangaroo routing or whatever. It is point to point, the love affair that Dubai has with Essex and Essex has with Dubai. And I mean, that's why they're there, and that's why the route is successful. I just don't think that if Kuwait Airways showed up, or even Qatar or Oman or Gulf, it would be anywhere near as successful as what Emirates is. And that's all because Emirates is based in Dubai, which, as I say, is, you know, when you drive past those little street signs when you're in France and it says, this is a Chambéry twinned with, and it says like where it's twinned with around the world, and it'll be twinned with, like, you know, Illinois and
yeah,
and like
the most random place. It's called
Gothenburg
like sister
and so on.
cities.
Yeah, sister cities, right? So Dubai, I think, needs to have a sign that it's twinned with. In fact, it doesn't need a sign. You go there a lot. You even know, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you can sometimes, you know, assess from a mile away. But anyway, that is, before I get into trouble, that's why Emirates is there.
Yeah. In partly, one counter argument I have to that is that if that was purely the case, I don't think they would fly. And since 2017, they've been doing they've used their flagship, one of just 9 aircraft, with their game changer first class, which says something.
Hold on. But I didn't say that the market is not premium. The market is a premium market. Well, Stansted's not a premium place, but the passengers are spending dollar on those routes.
Yeah, but I think the connotation with Essex is that perhaps it's not quite like London. So I think you also have to consider people like yourself or people who live in the north of London or northeast of London, but still part of London. But suddenly that's a very convenient option for them compared to driving through the whole city
Definitely.
to get to Heathrow.
Definitely. It's a convenient option for many as an alternative kind of London, in inverted commas, airport. But I'm going to push back harder and say that it is a premium market, okay, in terms of not a premium market that we would associate. I'm not talking about in any normality in terms of normalcy in aviation whatsoever. It's not a premium market. It's premium in a way that those passengers flying to Dubai spend. Okay, it's for them. It's all about the gram, right?
Yeah.
And what they're, and showing business class or even first class on Insta to their followers who also have in their Instagram bio London/Dubai, right? We're talking about. So that is what. So again, it's not all of the passengers on that route. Definitely not. We can never generalize on any route about everyone that is on the aircraft, but the reason why it is a success is because of that relationship.
Okay, so basically this is like the Gemma Collins Express, London to Dubai.
I didn't know you knew who she was.
Oh my God, of course. What did she say to Darren? I'm claustrophobic, Darren.
She's claustrophobic. Claustrophobic, that's it. She says cost, not clost. God, I did not think we'll be discussing her on air, but there we go. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
She's an icon. Anyway,
Suhail.
So wait, I want to know if QR launched flights to Gatwick, to Stansted, and let's say Stansted has affordable VIP services or something where you didn't have to endure the horrible
Stansted's
terminal.
affordable VIP services is a shared queue that they charge you for as premium, and it's fast track, and it's not.
Let's be mindful that we have a listener from Stansted Airport.
And our listener is his name Marco? I feel like it's Marco. Maybe that was wrong. But I feel like he's absolutely on our side. The guy works there and he knows exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, if they did launch flights there, would you take that instead of Heathrow?
You are funny. Nope. Moving on. We have a question here from Suhail. He says, "Hey Alex, I was just watching the news about extended flight cancellations in the Middle East due to the ongoing situation when your story popped up. So I thought, who better to ask than you and Dan? My question is, with some airlines cancelling flights weeks in advance and others keeping the schedule as is, risk assessment, such as missiles flying around or sudden closure of airspace, what is the main reason? Is it really about insurance? I understand United cancelling flights to Amman in Jordan, for example, as airspace closure can come at shorter notice. But why would a company like Aegean, where its flight from Athens to Beirut is just under 2 hours, why would they be cancelling so far in advance when it can be cancelled pretty last minute? What's your take on this?
I want to hear your take on this as a Middle East expert.
Yeah, so I feel, I know that there are a whole bunch of factors that come into play when an airline is determining whether or not it's safe to fly to the destination. And we can't pinpoint it to just one. It is a cocktail of contributors, right? And one of them, of course, is insurance. And in terms of insurance, we're talking about aircraft insurance as well. So the entity that insure the aircraft, they can pick up the phone, especially if you have leased that aircraft, which around 50% of the world's fleet is leased. They can pick up the phone and they can say, hey guys, you're not taking our plane to Beirut today because our own risk assessments show that something is about to happen or something could happen, or we just don't like what we see. And therefore the airline is in a situation where it can't say no to the leasing company, to the insurer. It has to abide by that mandate. That's that. Then, of course, you've got the ongoing risk assessments that airlines are always doing, where they can see that there is a period of instability ahead, or that we are in. We are in one now. You know, if you just quickly search any media, Bloomberg, FT, whoever, you will see that any night, it's been, is it tonight? Is it tomorrow night? And we spoke about this last week. When is, for example, Iran going to hit Israel? Because it's widely expected, and US intelligence suggests that it's coming, and maybe it didn't happen on Friday, but it's going to happen on Monday. All of that makes it a little bit nightmarish for airlines because they know that these risks are very real. They know that this intel is pretty decent, But at the same time, they're not ones to be dismissing it off and saying, well, nothing happened yesterday when they said that, so let's just continue to fly. And as a result, can you hear this? Sorry, the trash is being collected outside. Sorry if there's noise.
So are you going with them or?
Oh, wow. That wasn't very nice. Especially when I was mid-flow. Okay. So as a result, airlines are not willing to just take their decision into their own hand and stand up and say, we do not need to worry. They will always err on the side of caution, and that's what we are seeing. To go directly to your question about why someone like Aegean, who could cancel the flight last minute if they know that there's a missile in the air, or that Israel is about to hit Beirut, or that Iran is about to hit Israel, and so on. For Aegean, why would they voluntarily want to make their schedule even more complex than it already is by factoring in a destination that we know is on high alert over these days, and now it's become weeks? And as a result, it's just easier for them to provide stability to the network and stability to the airline, and arguably to the passengers, by declaring a suspension for a period of time rather than every day, board everyone and decide, can we go? Nope, get everyone off, aircraft now in the wrong place, rotation out of the way, everything out of schedule, and so on and so on. So that would be my answer.
Yeah. All right. Good answer.
We have a question from KJ. He says, hi Alex, loving the podcast with you and Dan. I've been listening from day one. Keep up the good work. I would like to ask, in relation to the discussion of last week's Emirates' quote, new 777 business class, about Singapore Airlines and their 777X products. Singapore Airlines has plans to introduce a brand new cabin products from first to economy on their 777X. But with the 777X heavily delayed, it derails Singapore's product launch for their new products, which the design of those products have already been signed off quite some time ago. At the moment, Singapore also has no plans to retrofit the new products into their existing fleet. Do you think it is wise for the airline to wait out for the 777X and launch their products on that aircraft, or should they launch some of the cabin classes right now, such as business and premium, or the 350 ULR, etc.? Because as wide and as comfortable as Singapore's current 777 and 350 business class seats still are, it is losing competitiveness day by day with no new features like doors or wireless charging. I would love to know yours and Dan's thoughts on this. Thanks, KJ. What do you think?
Okay, this again goes back to last week and our debate a little bit. Singapore Airlines is an airline that doesn't rely on the quality of its seats. It doesn't have to be industry leading. Of course, they have the A380 suites, which, like Emirates, create a halo effect around the airline. But I do think it is a bit strange that they're still taking delivery of this seat on new A350s. And they also have a regional business class seat, which is pretty good, especially for some of the shorter flights that they operate, that is a bit more modern in some ways. But Singapore Airlines is so conservative and very careful about, they're very particular about consistency, and they always put, if they say this is a regional aircraft route, like their flights from Singapore to Dubai is one of the longest, I think, that gets their regional business. They never put the long haul business on that route. So they are particular about that. That makes me think they don't want to introduce another product on their A350 to create more inconsistency. And they're just the type of airline that will make us wait in order to set the expectations very clearly. They know the all-around quality of what they deliver is among the best in the world. So they seem to be happy with that, and they continue to make investments in the soft product to make that better, renovating their lounges, etc., etc.
Very interesting. I agree entirely. I do agree. Singapore Airlines is still industry leading in some markets and with some products, but yeah, it's not so consistent. The good news is they're going to up their game with the 777X, but there is a big question mark as to when that aircraft will get airborne, as we know. A quick fire question here from Aguarin. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Sorry if I didn't. He says, question, if you had to bank miles earned to just one airline in each of the major alliances, where and why? Well, no, he didn't say why. He just said where. Which ones would it be?
Okay.
So One World, who are you banking your miles to?
Probably British Airways.
Okay, and Star Alliance?
Air Canada, 100%.
And SkyTeam?
Flying Blue, Air France KLM.
Look at you, you're very good at this. Next question
This
is from
my
Lucas.
job. I have a course about this.
You have a job? Lucas, I thought you just did the podcast with me. Lucas says, love the podcast. I look forward to it every week, so keep it up, guys. My question is about delayed luggage when I have a tight layover, not on the same ticket. Quelle horreur. He says, let's say I fly into Madrid in the evening, but my luggage doesn't arrive. If I have another flight the next day to New York, but my luggage does not arrive in time by that flight, whose responsibility is it to get it to New York? Does the airline only have to bring it, in this case, to Madrid, or do they have to bring it to my next destination, New York? Does it help if both airlines are in the same alliance? Right, so if you're not on the same ticket, my understanding is that airlines have no obligation to get it to where you have later ventured off to, which seems like wool, but is to be frank the way the industry works. So if you have flown, for example, Iberia to Madrid, and then you are on a separate ticket flying someone totally different. Let's say you're flying, okay, what's the competition? Let's say you're flying American on a separate ticket from Madrid to Dallas, for example, or to New York, as you said. Iberia has no obligation to get your luggage to New York or Dallas because you are not on the same ticket. It could help if you were in the same alliance, but not on paper.
Yeah.
What do you think?
This is something I have nightmares about constantly because my entire life is this, taking separate tickets. And even, let's say, I'll often do like a 24-hour or 48-hour layover somewhere. But sometimes if a bag goes missing, it can be missing for longer than that. And knock on wood, it's never happened to me. But if that happened, I frankly don't know what, presumably I would tell the airline immediately. So if I land in, let's say I have an upcoming trip around Southeast Asia. So let's say I land in Malaysia. I see on my air tag, my bag is still in my origin. So then immediately when I go talk to luggage services at the airport, I would tell them I'm leaving here in, let's say, 24 hours. So will the bag make it here before then? They should be able to give a yes and a no if they know where the bag is, because sometimes airlines will say we don't know where it is, so they need time to find it. If they give you a yes, so let's say they give you a no. Then you say, well, the problem is I'm continuing to this other country in 24 hours. So instead of sending the bag here, I'm going to need to ask you to send it to my next destination.
The reason why his voice just trembled is because he knows the look that the agent is about to give him at that point.
Yes, but to be honest, I would say that's not an unreasonable request because
it's not.
A lot of people travel like this. Business travelers often have very quick trips as well. So I would give that a try. If they say no, you just have to make that evaluation. I'd probably say just leave the bag in the origin and don't send it here because I know I'm leaving tomorrow, kind of thing. That's a tricky situation.
Tricky. Great question, by the way. Really great question.
Yeah, great question. Just completely off topic. I went onto Flight Radar and I found something crazy. So talking about the airspace closures in the Middle East, I very rarely track Iraqi Airways because they're not really an airline on my radar of airlines I'm looking to fly. But speaking of Beijing earlier, they have a flight from Beijing to Basra in Iraq, in southern Iraq. So right now, apparently they're not using Iranian airspace, which means that their flight is taking, well, let's see, it's now landing an hour and a half before schedule. It's flying, actually avoiding Russian airspace, ironically, but flying over China, over Kazakhstan, and then it goes down over Azerbaijan and Georgia and Turkey before turning down and flying over all of Iraq. So if you guys want to track that, it's flight IA 472. It's just a fascinating example of the detours airlines are having to take due to the current airspace issues.
And of course, there'll be implications there as to whether or not that aircraft is leased, who insures the aircraft, and they will also have a say as to where that aircraft is to overfly. So it's really, as we mentioned, a whole different variety of contributors. Another quick one from Espen. He says, "Hi, Alex, and the tall guy from Gothenburg. I was wondering how you would rank business class products purely by bedding." So basically, he wants to know who we think has decent business class bedding. For example, Air New Zealand seat is not perfect, but their mattress is fantastic. Oof. I think my quick instinct answer to this was United, right? And the Saks Fifth Avenue bedding. Just every time I see it, I think, wow, that's great. I mean, it would be great if it wasn't on a United seat,
exactly.
But
I'm like
very
every
nice.
time you see it in a photo, because you certainly haven't seen it on board, but
no, I'm not flying United.
Yeah, that is fantastic, and I love that he brought up Air New Zealand because I would have forgot. But yes, their seat sucks, but their mattress is better than what many airlines have in first class. It's thick. I'd say it's like probably 2 to 3 inches thick, super soft, just very, very comfortable. So props to Air New Zealand for that. And it makes sense because they operate a lot of very long flights, given how remote New Zealand is. So
Beyond writes in to ask, when was the last time that you flew a holiday airline? Something like TUI, Jet2, Condor, Discover, or Edelweiss?
Well, Alex?
2001.
Yeah, mine. I'm trying to think if I've ever.
No, I think 2001. First choice. That was what?
Yeah,
that was before TUI Thompson became first choice. So yeah, it was before Thompson, the first choice. I mean, 757.
Nice. That's nice. I think you would classify the airlines we normally fly in Scandinavia as that kind of thing, like bra.
Oh yeah, all these ones with sun in their name or something.
Yeah, no, I've never flown them, and I mean, to be honest, it's
amazing how much better they've got.
Yeah, and also full service airlines have got worse to kind of meet that level.
Yeah.
But as far as I can remember, and I might be forgetting, but usually I don't think I've ever flown a vacation airline. I haven't flown TUI. I haven't flown
Man of the People,
Thomas
everyone.
Cook, that used to be around.
At least I flew one in 2001.
I've flown a lot of low cost, but I don't think it's because
that's the difference, isn't it? Because I've flown hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands, I don't know, of EasyJet flights.
Yeah.
Especially between 2000 and 2012, or so.
Exactly. It's just a question of, did your family do holiday or package trips or not? And mine didn't.
No, neither did mine. Ramon is asking about what different perks airlines can offer, given that the gap between first class and business class is closing now, with the likes of Qatar adding caviar in business class, and that gap kind of. I mean, do we? He's also asking, do we still think there is a place for first class, or do we think it's close to being phased out? I think there is a place on some markets, on some routes, but I don't know about a uniform kind of approach to first class anymore, where it's on every single aircraft. I think that's just bad for business.
Bad for business class or bad for business?
Bad for the business of the airline.
Yeah. So I'm in the team of being pro first class. I think that first class, not on every aircraft, but it has benefits, like we've discussed 2 episodes in a row, including today, of creating a halo effect. But then,
like
first
that phrase,
class,
don't you?
First class, I think, gets discounted in the sense that people say, oh, business class is so good, Q Suite is so good, you get caviar or whatever. But a first class seat is just in a different league. We flew it together on the A380. If they slapped up some walls and doors there, even with the same product as
I have
Q
a question.
Suite.
Sam is asking, when is the Dan and Alex Qatar first class video coming out?
Yeah, is that Sam or is that Alex?
No, it's Sam. I'm going to screenshot you.
Sometime in September, it'll be.
Oh God, he's making us wait. Even I want to see this.
I know. I want to think of what horrifying edits I can make to make you.
Oh my goodness! If you skew the edit somehow, I don't know, present me as something that I am not, I will sue your ass.
What are you going to do? Share it on Twitter again without tagging me?
No, I'm going to file a lawsuit because I'm going to match your American energy. And I'm going to sue this. It's like the go-to Starbucks order.
No, it will be a great video. But back to first class. So like I was saying, if you had put high walls and closing doors and everything on that first class seat, and you took the exact same soft product as you have in Q Suite, it would still be a vastly superior experience to Q Suite just because of all the space. First class seats occupy so much more real estate than business class. So to me, it doesn't matter how good the soft product gets in business. And I'm saying this as a soft product person. If you have something like an Emirates first class seat or a Singapore Airlines first class seat or an ANA or whatever it is, it clearly has its moment to shine and its space in the industry.
Finally, we've got a question from Tony. He says, "Hi Alex, love the podcast. It makes me have something to look forward to on hump day. Question, being super experienced travelers and having flown miles and miles across the world, how do accidents like the recent one in Brazil affect you guys and your trust in aviation? I assume, like me, you just look at the data and get reassurance that flying is still the safest way to travel by far. But I must admit that watching the horrible images of the plane plummeting from the sky gave me the chills and took away some excitement for his next round of air travel." Tony, we share your sentiments in that this was absolutely horrifying, this accident with the ATR aircraft in Brazil on a domestic flight. The footage, scary, terrifying, horrific. I found it deeply uncomfortable to watch it even just once, never mind wanting to rewatch, to just try to determine what, looked like, what was going on, what was happening, why was this happening. We will leave that to the investigators, obviously, and we will share with you details as they become more available as to what happened. There are a whole bunch of solid, educated theories as to what could have happened, including perhaps the potential involvement of ice, given the conditions at the time, and the ATR's kind of lack of compatibility with, or the complications that it has with ice. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers go to the families of those that were on board, because this was a really horrific tragedy made only worse by the footage, I think.
Yeah, there's so much you can read online about what the potential causes are. There's all types of things that have come out, including about this specific aircraft. But for now, we'll just say absolutely horrific. And of course, seeing that, it sends a shiver down your spine, and it just makes you think, okay, until we know what's going on, am I keen to hop on an ATR? Maybe not. But then again, I have flown ATRs dozens of times, given where I grew up, and also many remote regions of the world I've traveled to only have ATRs. Even parts of Southeast Asia, you fly between Cambodia and Laos. And
it is an aircraft with an incredibly, safety record. It has a very good safety record. Not to say that there are not, or there have not been, a couple of issues in some circumstances, as I said, potentially involving ice buildup, things like that. But this is something that the investigators will be looking at. This, yes, to take your point, Tony, we reassure ourselves with data. Air travel is still the safest form of transport. Sometimes it's even safer than getting into an elevator. That is the fact. But that doesn't take away from the tragedy that we saw last week. And that was just really, really awful stuff. It's incredibly, incredibly rare. But at the same time, I don't think it's the time for that conversation now, because, tell that to the families of those that have just lost their loved ones in something so rare but so horrific. It's really, really troubling. And I am absolutely, keeping a close eye on what the investigation and this initial part of the investigation is going to surface in terms of what could have gone wrong, because this is an aircraft that is in service just about everywhere. As I say, good safety record. Dan, you've basically grown up on the ATR fleet. And, for that reason, we need to get some answers as quickly as we can from those investigators.
Yeah, we will. over the coming months, as information comes out, of course, we'll be discussing it here.
We will conclude today's Q&A session. There are a whole bunch of others that we will save for next week's episode. And please do feel free to get in touch anytime to tell us about your scenarios, what you are facing this summer. Many of you, I know, are joining us and listening to the podcast from your summer travels. We hope they are going well. And let us know how air travel has been performing for you during this period in terms of delays, on-time performance, service, and so on. We are always looking forward to hearing from you guys. We'll wrap up and we'll join you same time, same place next week.
Yeah. See you then on air. Bye-bye.
See you later.